at least in our branch, what was happening was we began to have more and more use of our forelimbs. So we have forelimbs and we have hind limbs. So forelimbs is the limbs that are in front, closer to the mouth, and hind limbs are the ones that are closer to the anus. That's pretty much the difference, right? And in the branch of evolution that we come in, the forelimbs began to be used for other things than just walking. Whereas in all the other branches, like cats and dogs and horses, the forelimbs and hind limbs are exactly for the same purpose, for walking, for running. There's no difference. Just in our branch, we began to start moving things around with the forelimbs, and gradually there was a shift in our center of gravity backwards. And this was an experiment. The way I see it is, this was an experiment. It could have worked, it could not have worked. If it wouldn't have worked, we wouldn't be here. As simple as that.
It's how rats kind of go up like that. And
Right.
squirrels go up.
Yes. So the squirrels were actually, so some of the rodents, the squirrels would pick up a nut, right? And eat that nut like this. And even beavers in the forest, the beavers were able to use their forelimbs to say build a dam. You know, those, you've seen stories of water coming in and beavers building a little dam. So gradually some of the animals figured out that they can balance themselves on the hind legs and still move their forelegs to get more things done. Before that, the only way to interact with the environment was with our mouths. So if you look at a dog or a lion, the only way they will interact or move anything is with their mouth. They will pick up their babies with their mouth. They will hunt with their mouth. They will eat with their mouth. They will try to clear the area with their mouth. Everything is with their mouth and their face. There's no other way to interact with the environment. More control is possible
On the environment.
on the environment if you use your hind legs for something else and forelegs for something else. So their brain started evolving.
Because of the usage of the hands.
Yes.
Hmm.
And that is why the hands started developing fingers. This was a huge thing. I cannot stress how big of a thing developing fingers were.
For the journey of the brain.
Yes. Simply because till now, dexterity or moving small things accurately was not an option, which is why fingers evolved. And so evolution realized that you can have more control over the environment by learning to move particular digits independently. Huge thing.
Cut back to 2025. Is there still an evolving relationship between your hand and your brain?
Absolutely. If you look at the brain, there's something called as the homunculus. So the homunculus is a shape in your brain that represents what part of your brain controls what part of your body. Okay. So you would imagine that you have your legs, 2 hands. So you would imagine that all of these parts will get equal amount of real estate in the brain, because the brain real estate is very precious. Ek millimeter is very precious and fought for. But would you believe that 90% of that real estate is just for your face and your hands?
Wow. Of you're saying the physical area of the human brain. Wow.
And only one small part is for your chest and legs and feet. Most of that part, it's called the motor cortex, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for how your body moves. So your movement is controlled by the motor cortex, and the majority of that area is just for your fingers and your face.
Let's talk about our closest cousins, the chimpanzees. They also have hands.
Yes.
Their hands are way more powerful than our hands.
Okay. Yes.
They're the stronger species.
Yes.
I'm assuming our hands are more superior than their hands in terms of intricacy. Like we have a neater handwriting.
Yes. But there are very interesting studies of chimpanzees doing some pretty dexterous work. And like there are chimpanzees who've learned to type on a keyboard, which is pretty impressive, right? Because learning to type is not an easy thing. So there is a whole school of thought that a chimpanzee brain is capable of learning a lot of things that a human brain is. Um, Except that it's difficult to convince a chimpanzee brain as to why should it learn it. But anyway, it's almost like an obscure question, but the brain is almost the same. A chimpanzee brain and a human brain is almost the same, so the networks are all in place. And chimpanzee brain also has dexterity. So there are monkeys who can work on a Rubik's cube, which takes a lot of dexterity, like turning and all of that. So it is possible.
I'm just trying to think of the cool things that humans can do with the hands that chimpanzees can't. I'd probably say art or something.
But that's not a function of the hand. That's a function of thought.
Where I'm going at with this is what humans are to chimpanzees. The next stage of humankind will be to human beings.
Interesting. I'll tell you what it is. So when we talk about movement, chimpanzees and humans theoretically would be capable of pretty much all of it. Okay? So when we talk of evolution, say यहाँ पे तुम्हारा reptilian brain है. Reptilian brain के ऊपर तुम्हारा limbic system है, which is the emotional part of the brain. Monkeys also have this limbic system. On top of the limbic system is your prefrontal cortex. Okay? In the prefrontal cortex, the oldest part is your motor cortex. Does that make sense? So the motor cortex is where your hands and legs are getting moved. Chimpanzees, orangutans, great apes all have a motor cortex that is pretty much as developed as us. But evolution didn't end there, because beyond that, evolution progressed. Our prefrontal cortex kept evolving, and the most recent parts of our prefrontal cortex is where we differ from monkeys. Chimpanzees. Because we are capable of insight. And this is where the story changes. Because till now, from say the earliest microorganisms, had no sense of whether it's alive or not. We are guessing. At some point, chimpanzees seem to build, a lot of animals actually seem to build a sense of community. They would form long-lasting relationships. They would break up. They would do a lot of things that human societies also do. So they're also capable of thinking. They would elect a leader. There would be one person who's deciding everything. They would fight against different tribes. A lot of things that human beings are still doing. But as far as we know, they have cognition, which means they can think. But what they don't have is metacognition, which is, can they think about thinking?
Can they think about thinking?
Can I think about why am I thinking?
It's like a human being dwelling upon his or her own mental health.
Yes. This is metacognition, and this is something that only an evolved prefrontal cortex can do. Because until now, everything else that a human being does, a monkey can also do, which is fight for food, make a family, take care of their kids, go to work, technically, which is to go and find food, build a tribe, protect your family. All of this monkeys also do. What can humans do currently that a monkey cannot is to think about, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And why am I thinking? What is this What is going on?
The spiritual aspect of life.
You can think of it as a spiritual aspect of life. You can just think of it as self-awareness. So this is the crux of the consciousness conversation, which is, like I said at the start of the episode, consciousness is not binary. You can't say this is conscious or not conscious. Consciousness is a loop. It's a spiral. Are you conscious? A bacteria is also conscious because it is acting. But are you conscious of being conscious? And are you conscious of being conscious of being conscious? That spiral is what leads to evolution.
Whatever our next stage of evolution is, what role do you think the hands will play? Or is it too difficult to?
No, we can extrapolate, right? Let's look at the principles that we have formed so far. Why is evolution happening? For survival. What is the other reason that evolution is happening? For control of our environment. So why did hands evolve? Because we wanted to control our environment better. Today, we are not really controlling our environment with our hands so much. Because now we have found third-party tools to control our environment for us, right? Because monkeys needed to evolve hands because they wanted to dig and they wanted to look for things and they wanted to climb and they wanted to break a fruit off. Today, machines do all of it. So technically, we don't need fingers so much. We need fingers to type, but now we have voice. And eventually, suppose if we all get brain chips, technically the reason that we evolved hands will go away.
It'll lose its purpose.
It'll lose its purpose.
Like a tail.
Like a tail. So we will not need fingers because the only point of fingers was to interact with our environment. But now we are interacting with our environment in other ways. So while we are still scrolling with our fingers and typing with our fingers, we are also figuring out other ways of interacting with the environment. And when I say environment, I mean digital environment. We still need a hand. We still need fingers to open a car key or open a door. But what if you figure out other ways of doing all of it? What if you can just tell the door to open? What if you look at the car and it opens? All of these things, if it's possible, and if it sustains for 1,000,000 years, it is possible that we might lose our fingers. Because evolution will not keep anything that we don't use for a long time.
What would you say is the most significant thing we do with our hands today?
Eating would be the primary thing, and that's not changed. Eating would always remain the most important thing that we do. And that will always remain a core drive. And if you look at it very simplistically, everything else that you do is, say, at your job or whatever, is in a way linked to being successful enough that you can eat.
Wow.
Right? Now, this is at the reptilian brain level. Your motivation at the reptilian brain level is this much. Does that mean that we don't have more to offer? No. So at the limbic brain level, you will have other motivations. So you will have ego. So the limbic brain is where ego comes in. Ki main ye hu. This is who I am.
Tiger taking charge of its territory.
Yeah. Sort of like that. Yes. So that's where the ego comes in. So ego comes with its own motivation. Then you have your prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex comes with its own motivation, that I want people to look at me this way. I want to be remembered in 100 years. A tiger will not think like this because a tiger's brain is not capable of thinking 100 years ahead. Only a human brain can even conceive of time like this. Ki what will you do? If you try to have this conversation with a tiger, ki what will you do in 5 years? Even if you could speak in a tiger language, how do you put that thought across? Because for a tiger, it's all day to day. I'll wake up and then whatever my body is telling me to do, I will do. How do you plan 5 years ahead? the part of the brain that does that is the prefrontal cortex, specifically the frontopolar part of the prefrontal cortex.
If you enjoyed today's clip, make sure you check out these curated playlists that we've made especially for you related to the subject that was spoken about in this clip.